9 years. That's how long I went without taking a real vacation. 9 years of being a single mother. 9 years of midnight system crashes. 9 years of putting out corporate fires while slowly burning out myself. Now, I was finally sitting on a quiet stretch of North Carolina beach, watching my daughter build a crooked, overly ambitious sandcastle. For the first time in nearly a decade, my work phone was face down in the sand. Untouched. Ignored. I was 42 years old. My name is Amelia Grant, and for 9 years I had been the silent backbone of a tech company that pretended I was replaceable. My husband, Daniel, died when our daughter Lily was only 4 months old. A sudden aneurysm. One day he was teasing me about how I held Lily like she was made of glass. The next, I was standing in a hospital hallway that smelled like antiseptic and finality. I remember holding Lily at his funeral, her tiny fingers gripping my blouse, and making a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. I'll be everything you need. Grief does strange things to people. For me, it turned into obsession. Work became predictable. Systems either ran, or they failed. Code either compiled, or it didn't. Unlike death, tech problems had solutions. So I buried myself in it. I became indispensable. When servers crashed at 3 a.m. I answered. When product launches failed minutes before going live, I fixed them. When others went home to their families, I stayed. Because I didn't have anyone waiting for me anymore. Except I did. Lily grew up learning how to microwave her own dinners. She learned how to fall asleep to the sound of my keyboard clicking through the wall. She learned not to expect too much. That was the part that hurt the most. She never complained. 3 months ago she asked me something that shattered me. Mom, when was the last time we did something? Just us. I opened my mouth to answer. And I couldn't. Not a distracted movie night. Not a rushed breakfast between emails. Not a half-listened conversation while typing. A real moment. I didn't have one. That night, after she went to bed, I sat on the kitchen floor and cried harder than I had since Daniel died. Because I realized something terrifying. I had survived losing my husband, but I was slowly losing my daughter. So I made a decision. 1 week. No laptop. No emergency logins. No just 5-minute calls. Just me and Lily. It took 2 months to arrange. I had so much unused vacation time that HR actually called to confirm it wasn't an error. I documented everything. Created backup protocols. Left step-by-step failover guides. I did their job for them before leaving. My boss, Victoria Hale, approved it with a one-line reply. Fine. Just make sure nothing breaks. As if I controlled the universe. As if I hadn't spent 9 years making sure nothing ever did. And now here I was. Watching Lily run toward the ocean like she had discovered it personally. The sun was warm. The wind smelled like salt. And for the first time in years my chest didn't feel tight. I felt peace. Mom. Lily shouted. Look. I made towers. She was crouched over her sandcastle, tongue sticking out in concentration. It's beautiful, I laughed. It needs a moat. She gasped like I had just suggested building a kingdom. That's when my phone rang. I froze. That sound had controlled my life for nearly a decade. I told myself I wouldn't check it. Old habits die hard. I turned it over. Victoria Hale. My stomach dropped. She never called unless something was on fire. I stepped a few feet away, pressing the phone to my ear. Yes. Amelia, I need you back in the office. Immediately. No greeting. No hesitation. I'm on approved leave, I said carefully. You signed it. The audit prep is collapsing. Systems only you understand are failing. Your team is incompetent. I closed my eyes. I documented everything. Jason has access. Priya knows the backup chain. Jason locked himself out within hours. Priya called in sick. I don't have time for excuses. Book a flight tonight. The old pressure rose in my chest. Say yes. Fix it. Apologize. Be the reliable one. That's who I had been. Behind me, Lily's voice floated through the wind. Mom. The moat needs water. My throat tightened. Victoria, I said slowly, I'm not coming back. This is my first vacation in 9 years. Silence. Then ice. Your child is not my concern. Your job is. Something inside me cracked. I have given this company 9 years. I missed birthdays. School plays. Bedtime stories. I am asking for 1 week. Her voice sharpened. Then you've made your choice. Consider this your termination. Effective immediately. The line went dead. The ocean kept moving. Seagulls kept screaming. And I sat there, staring at a blank screen. Fired. 9 years. Gone in a 3-minute phone call. Mom. I looked up. Lily was standing in front of me, sand on her knees, concern in her eyes. You look weird. I could call Victoria back. I could beg. I could fix it. That was the safe choice. But I had spent 9 years choosing safe. And it had cost me everything that mattered. I looked at my daughter. Then I turned off the phone. Everything's okay, I said, pulling her into a hug tighter than I meant to. Let's test that moat. As we walked toward the water hand in hand, something shifted inside me. I had just lost my job. But for the first time in years, I felt free. Freedom lasted exactly 14 hours. The next morning I turned my phone back on. I told myself it was just to check Lily's school portal. Just in case. 17 emails. All from my former employer. My pulse started pounding before I even opened the first one. The subject line read, Termination procedure. Urgent compliance required. Clinical. Detached. I had 48 hours to return all company property. Security badge. Encrypted drives. Failure to comply would result in legal action. Legal action. After 9 years of loyalty. The second email was worse. It came from their legal department. They referenced a non-compete clause buried in a contract I'd signed years ago when Daniel was still alive. When I was too sleep-deprived and grief-stricken to read every line carefully. According to their interpretation, I was prohibited from working for any competing firm for 18 months. 18 months. They weren't just firing me. They were trying to cage me. The third email was from Victoria. Short. Surgical. Your sudden abandonment has caused severe operational disruption. Industry partners have been informed of your unreliability. I strongly advise you to reconsider your current course before you permanently damage your career. I read it 3 times. First I felt fear. Cold and familiar. Then anger. Hot and blinding. But underneath both, clarity. If I was truly insignificant, if I was as replaceable as she always implied, why the threats? Why the legal pressure? Why the attempt to blacklist me? Because things were breaking. And without me she couldn't fix them. Over the next 2 days, former coworkers began texting me quietly. Off the record, Jason had locked himself out of multiple systems. The comprehensive documentation, I left? Apparently too complex for people who never bothered to understand it in the first place. Priya returned from sick leave only to discover something I had quietly handled for years. The automated backups hadn't been running properly. I had been manually correcting them every night. No one knew. No one asked. Now the audit, the same audit Victoria used to justify firing me, was unraveling. A company worth hundreds of millions was being held together by digital duct tape. And I had been the duct tape. I should have felt vindicated. I felt guilty. It wasn't Victoria I worried about. It was the junior engineers who would get blamed. The clients who depended on systems I built. The employees who had mortgages and kids and no idea how fragile everything really was. Lily noticed the shift immediately. We were having lunch at a seafood place overlooking the ocean when she put down her fork and studied me with unsettling precision. You're thinking about work again. Not a question. I almost lied. Habit. But I stopped. Yes, I admitted softly. I am. She nodded slowly. Are you going to leave? The words hit harder than Victoria's threats ever could. How many times had she asked that over the years? How many times had I said yes? Yes, sweetheart, there's an emergency. Yes, mommy has to fix something. Yes, I'll be back soon. This time I didn't hesitate. No, I said firmly. I'm not going anywhere. She smiled. But there was something cautious in it. Like she wasn't fully convinced. And that broke me more than losing my job ever could. That evening the resort restaurant was packed. Some tech conference had ended nearby, and half the dining room was buzzing with talk about infrastructure trends and market projections. It felt surreal. Like I was listening to ghosts of my old life. The host apologized and mentioned we might have to share our table if it got crowded. I shrugged. That's fine. 20 minutes later a man approached us. Late 50s. Silver hair. Calm presence. The kind of effortless confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. "I'm terribly sorry," he said warmly. "May I join you? The place is overflowing." Lily looked at me. I nodded. Of course. He introduced himself as Richard Lawson. Polite. Observant. We made small talk about the beach, the weather, the unusually tech-heavy crowd. Then Lily did what children do best. She paid attention. She pointed at his phone screen. "That looks like the monitoring dashboard my mom uses." I nearly choked on my water. Richard looked at me with interest. "Oh, you work in infrastructure." "Formerly," I said. "Operations engineering." "Which firm?" "Helix Systems." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "Impressive architecture. Especially the failover framework. Analysts have written about its resilience." I blinked. "You follow back-end architecture analysis?" "In my line of work," he said calmly, "I pay attention to systems that actually function." He studied me. "You said formerly?" "I was terminated yesterday. For taking an approved vacation." Silence settled between us. Not awkward. Measured. "You built much of their core infrastructure, didn't you?" he asked quietly. I felt exposed. "Yes." "For how long?" 9 years. He leaned back slowly. "And they fired you during your first vacation?" "Yes." Lily had fallen quiet, sensing something important was happening. Richard's expression shifted. "Not pity. Assessment. That's short-sighted. That's one word for it." We talked for nearly 2 hours. About infrastructure philosophy. About sustainability. About how no system should depend entirely on one human being destroying themselves to maintain it. At some point Lily fell asleep against my arm. Richard noticed. He smiled softly. "You're not just technically exceptional," he said. "You understand responsibility." He reached into his jacket and handed me a simple card. Just his name. A number. No flashy title. "Before you make any decisions about your future," he said quietly, "call me." I turned the card over. And that's when my stomach dropped. Richard Lawson. Founder. Chairwoman's Office. Apex Cloud International. One of the largest infrastructure firms in the world. He stood, adjusted his jacket. "And Amelia?" he added. "Companies that treat people like you as disposable eventually learn how wrong they are." Then he walked away, leaving me staring at a future I hadn't expected. And for the first time since Victoria's call, I realized something. Maybe I hadn't lost everything. Maybe someone else had. By the time we packed our bags to leave the resort, Helix Systems was already bleeding. I didn't have to search for updates. They found me. Former colleagues messaged in fragments. "It's worse than we thought. The audit team is asking for documentation no one can find. 3 major clients are threatening to pull contracts." I tried not to read everything. But curiosity, and maybe a little unresolved loyalty, kept pulling me back in. Apparently the failover protocols were collapsing in unpredictable ways. Not because I'd built them poorly, but because I had been quietly compensating for outdated hardware and budget cuts for years. Victoria had postponed infrastructure investments repeatedly to make quarterly numbers look better. I had absorbed the damage. Patched it. Reinforced it. Covered it. Now those cracks were visible to everyone. And without me manually stabilizing things at 2 a.m., the illusion was gone. One message hit me harder than the rest. "They're blaming you." Of course they were. The official narrative was that I had abandoned the company during a critical audit window. That I left without ensuring operational continuity. 9 years of sacrifice erased by a single memo. I felt anger rising again. But then Lily ran into the room holding a seashell like it was treasure. "Mom, can we come back next year?" And suddenly none of it mattered as much. We drove home the next morning. For 3 days I ignored every email from Helix. Then one subject line caught my eye. "Let's resolve this professionally." It was from Victoria. The tone had changed. No threats. No legal aggression. Just cold negotiation. "Amelia, tensions were high during our last call. I'm prepared to discuss reinstatement under revised terms. The company needs your expertise. Let's find a solution." Reinstatement. As if firing me had been a minor scheduling error. As if she hadn't attempted to blacklist me. As if she hadn't threatened my livelihood. I didn't respond. 2 hours later, another message arrived. Clients are escalating concerns. Your colleagues are overwhelmed. I trust you care about them enough to reconsider. There was guilt, her favorite weapon. And it worked briefly. I pictured Jason panicking in the server room. Priya trying to interpret documentation she never had time to fully study. The junior engineers terrified of making mistakes that would cost millions. I had trained them. I cared about them. But then another thought surfaced. If I return now, what would change? Victoria would still control the culture. Still centralize power. Still sacrifice people to protect her image. I would just be reinforcing the cycle. That afternoon, Lily and I were in the backyard attempting to plant tomatoes. Unsuccessfully, when my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. Amelia. Victoria's voice. She wasn't calling from her office line. You've been avoiding my emails. I've been unemployed for 4 days, I replied evenly. I don't report to you. This isn't about ego. It never is with you. Silence. Then she shifted tactics. The board is involved now. The audit is failing. If this collapses, hundreds of employees could lose their jobs. Is that what you want? There was again. Responsibility. Redirected. You created a system where one person was essential to everything, I said calmly. That's not sustainable leadership. That's dependency. You're being emotional. No, I said quietly. I'm being clear. She exhaled sharply. Name your price. Double salary. Executive title. Full control over infrastructure. For a moment, the old version of me stirred. Recognition. Validation. Power. But then I looked through the kitchen window. Lily was outside, kneeling in the dirt, completely focused on something small and green. Present. Grounded. And I knew the truth. If I went back, nothing fundamental would change. I would just be paid more to sacrifice the same things. I'm not coming back, I said. Her tone hardened. You're making a mistake. Maybe, I replied. But it's mine to make. She hung up. The next escalation came 2 days later. She showed up. At the beach. Not the same resort. We had taken a short weekend trip to a quieter stretch of coast before school resumed. I saw her before she saw me. Designer suit. Heels sinking into sand. Out of place. Uncomfortable. Furious. Lily was wading in shallow water under a lifeguard's watch. Victoria stopped in front of my beach chair. You're really going to let this implode? You drove 3 hours to say that? The board is discussing acquisition scenarios. Investors are panicking. That sounds like an executive problem. Her composure cracked slightly. You built that infrastructure. Yes. You care about it. I did. She crouched slightly, lowering her voice. If this fails publicly, your name will be attached to it. Do you understand that? Your career could be over before it restarts. There was the final threat. Not salary. Not guilt. Fear. I stood up slowly so we were eye level. My name is already attached to it, I said. 9 years of flawless uptime. 9 years of innovation. If it collapses now, that won't erase what I built. It will expose how dependent you were on something you never valued. Her jaw tightened. You're choosing pride over responsibility. No, I said softly. I'm choosing boundaries over abuse. That word hit her. Abuse. He straightened. This isn't over. It is for me. Behind her, Lily waved. Mom. The waves are bigger. I stepped around Victoria without another word and walked toward my daughter. The water was cold. Refreshing. Alive. As Lily grabbed my hand and pulled me deeper into the surf, I felt something final settle inside me. Victoria could threaten, negotiate, manipulate, but she no longer controlled my fear. Behind me, she stood alone on the sand, watching, and for the first time in 9 years, I wasn't the one drowning. The collapse didn't happen quietly. It exploded. 3 days after Victoria showed up at the beach, Helix Systems missed a critical compliance benchmark during the audit. Not a minor discrepancy. A catastrophic one. A failover simulation failed live in front of auditors and board representatives. The redundancy protocol, the very system I had manually reinforced for years, didn't trigger correctly. News traveled fast. Faster than Victoria could contain it. Industry forums lit up first. Then financial blogs. Then mainstream business media. Helix Systems faces infrastructure breakdown amid executive turmoil. Key engineer fired days before audit collapse. Internal culture under scrutiny. I sat at my kitchen table reading headlines about a company I had practically lived inside for nearly a decade. It felt surreal. Like watching your old house burn down on television. Part of me expected to feel triumph. Vindication. I felt tired. Tired of the narrative. Tired of the blame cycle. Tired of how predictable it all was. Then the board investigation details started leaking. Anonymous employees spoke about long-term budget suppression. Deferred upgrades. Security patches delayed to protect quarterly optics. And buried in multiple internal memos? My name. Repeatedly. Not as the cause of failure. But as the person who had flagged vulnerabilities for years. Concerns documented. Emails archived. Requests denied. I hadn't just been holding things together. I had been warning them. The board moved quickly after that. Victoria Hale was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Within 72 hours she resigned. Publicly, it was framed as a mutual transition. Privately everyone knew. She had run out of insulation. The stock dropped 38% in a week. Major clients pulled contracts. Helix entered acquisition negotiations with a larger competitor. 9 years of loyalty. Gone. Just like that. I should have felt small watching something so massive crumble. Instead I felt something else. Distance. For the first time the chaos wasn't mine to manage. Lily found me staring at my phone that afternoon. "Are you sad?" she asked gently. "I don't think so," I said honestly. "I think I'm just processing." "Processing like your computers?" I laughed. "Something like that." She climbed into the chair beside me. "You didn't break it," she said matter-of-factly. "No. They broke it." "Yes." She nodded, satisfied with the simplicity. Children have a gift adults lose. They don't overcomplicate accountability. That evening my phone rang again. This time the name on the screen made my pulse spike for entirely different reasons. Richard Lawson. I stepped outside before answering. "I imagine you've seen the news," he said calmly. "It's hard to avoid. Board investigations rarely move that fast unless the evidence is overwhelming." I exhaled slowly. I never wanted it to collapse. "I know," he replied. "That's why I called." Silence settled briefly. Then his tone shifted, not to sympathy. To opportunity. "You were right not to go back." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until he said it. "You weren't refusing responsibility," he continued. "You were refusing exploitation." I leaned against the porch railing. "It doesn't feel heroic." "It isn't," he said. "It's healthy." That word hit differently. Healthy. Not rebellious. Not vindictive. Healthy. "I've had my team review publicly available information about Helix's architecture," Richard continued. "It's clear one person built the majority of its operational resilience." "I had help," I said automatically. "I'm sure you did," he replied evenly. "But leadership is visible in the design. I recognize patterns." He paused. "I want to formalize our conversation." My stomach tightened slightly. "I'm listening." "I'd like you to join Apex Cloud International." There was direct, clear, no emergency rescues, no hero dependency structures. "I want you designing sustainable systems, technically and culturally." "Culturally?" I asked. "Yes. Infrastructure isn't just servers. It's people. And you understand what happens when leadership fails that side of the architecture." He wasn't wrong. "I won't sacrifice my daughter again," I said quietly. "You won't have to," he replied immediately. "Remote flexibility. Outcome-based evaluation. You build the teams you wish you'd had. No late-night emergencies unless I volunteered. No centralized knowledge traps. No martyr expectations. And compensation?" I asked cautiously. He named a number that made me grip the railing tighter. It was nearly triple what I made at Helix. Plus equity. Plus long-term incentive structure. For a moment my mind went blank. Not because of greed. Because of validation. It wasn't about the money. It was about being seen. Valued. Not as a tool. But as a strategist, I need to think, I said honestly. Of course, he replied. But Amelia? Yes. You didn't lose your job. You outgrew it. After we hung up, I stood there for a long time. Screw it. Maybe that was the right word. Helix hadn't fired me into nothingness. It had forced evolution. Lily opened the back door. Is that the nice dinner man? Yes. Is he giving you a new job? Maybe. She tilted her head. Will you still be here? The only question that mattered. Yes, I said firmly. I will always be here. She nodded once. Then take it. I laughed softly. You don't even know what it is. I know you're happier, she said. And that was the moment I understood something profound. For years I thought providing stability meant sacrificing presence. But stability without presence is just distance with a paycheck. Helix was being dismantled. Victoria's empire had cracked under the weight of its own design. And for the first time, I wasn't bracing for impact. I was choosing direction. I looked at Richard's business card sitting on the kitchen counter. Then I picked it up and dialed. 3 weeks later I started at Apex Cloud International. Not in a corner cubicle. Not as someone's invisible crisis manager. But as Director of Infrastructure Strategy. The title didn't matter as much as the structure. My first official meeting wasn't about uptime percentages or audit deadlines. It was about sustainability. How do we build systems, Richard asked in that calm, deliberate way of his, that don't require heroes to survive? For 9 years I had been the hero. And heroes burn out. I helped design decentralized access controls so no single engineer carried the entire load. I restructured on-call rotations to eliminate chronic exhaustion. I built documentation standards that were actually readable, not theoretical binders no one opened. But more importantly, I built boundaries into the culture. No after-hours expectation without compensation. No single point of human failure. No glorifying overwork as loyalty. And something strange happened. Performance improved. When people weren't drowning, they innovated. When they weren't terrified, they spoke up. When they weren't exhausted, they thought clearly. Turns out burnout isn't a productivity strategy. It's a ticking time bomb. I worked mostly from home. My office overlooked our backyard, not a glass corporate tower. At 3:15 every afternoon I closed my laptop. Non-negotiable. I picked Lily up from school myself. The first time I showed up consistently she looked confused. By week 2 she stopped double-checking. By month 2, she stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. That trust, rebuilding it, was harder than any infrastructure overhaul I'd ever done. Trust doesn't restore with a single decision. It restores with repetition. Soccer practices. Homework help. Burnt dinners we laughed about. Movie nights without my phone face up beside me. I learned things about my daughter I should have known years ago. She loves astronomy. She hates olives. She wants to design video games someday. One evening as I helped her with a science project about renewable energy grids, she paused mid-sentence. You're different now. I smiled slightly. Good different or scary different? Here different. That hit me deeper than any promotion ever could. Because she was right. For years I had been physically present but mentally divided. My body in the room. My brain in a server rack. Well, I was here. All of me. News about Victoria surfaced occasionally. The board's internal report became public months later. It detailed budget manipulations, knowledge hoarding, intimidation patterns. Her career in executive leadership effectively ended. Helix was absorbed into a competitor at a fraction of its previous valuation. Hundreds of employees were restructured. Some found better roles elsewhere. Some left the industry entirely. I didn't celebrate her downfall. I didn't need to. Consequences don't require applause. They just require time. One Saturday in early autumn Lily and I returned to the Carolina coast. Not the same beach. This one felt lighter. Less loaded. We walked barefoot along the shoreline, waves brushing our ankles. The air smelled like salt and clean beginnings. Mom, she said quietly. Yeah. I'm glad you got fired. I laughed, surprised all over again. That's still an unusual thing to say. I mean it, she insisted. You were tired before. He searched for the right word. Far away. I swallowed. I thought I was protecting us, I admitted. Building security. You were building something, she said thoughtfully. Just not us. Children. They say the quiet truths adults avoid. I'm sorry it took me so long, I said. She shrugged gently. You figured it out. We stopped near the waterline where tiny crabs darted sideways into wet sand. Mom, she continued, if your new job ever makes you like that again, will you leave? The question wasn't accusatory. It was protective. Of herself. Of us. Yes, I said immediately. Without hesitation. Without fear. Yes. She nodded once. Satisfied. We started building a sandcastle together. Not an ambitious kingdom. Just something small and sturdy. And as we dug and shaped and laughed when the walls collapsed, I realized something that no corporate milestone had ever taught me. Being fired felt like an ending. It wasn't. It was an interruption. A violent one, yes. But necessary. For 9 years I believed my value was tied to endurance. To how much pressure I could absorb. To how indispensable I made myself. But indispensability is a trap. When you become the only pillar holding something up, you are also the easiest to discard once the cracks show. I wasn't fired because I was weak. I was fired because I had stopped being controllable. And that difference changed everything. The sun began dipping lower, casting gold across the waves. Lily leaned against me, resting her head on my shoulder. Mom. You don't look scared anymore. I hadn't realized that was visible. But she was right. For years I operated from fear. Fear of instability. Fear of failure. Fear of not providing enough. No. I wasn't fearless. I was aligned. Aligned with what mattered. Aligned with the kind of example I wanted to set. Because one day Lily would enter her own career. And she would remember this. She would remember that her mother chose presence over pressure. Boundaries over abuse. Growth over guilt. And maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't need 9 years to learn that lesson. We watched the tide slowly erase our footprints behind us. The past doesn't disappear. But it softens. Ahead of us, the shoreline stretched wide and open. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't bracing for impact. I was walking forward. With my daughter's hand in mine.